In this film, I'm going to describe how to lay out a combed or a stamped parget in panels. So the parget on these two houses is the traditional layout, and it has panels above and below each of the windows and the doors. The panel above the door is slightly smaller, so it lines up nicely. There are 6-inch, 150mm flat borders between the panels. And that's quite a good size for an exterior because it allows space for the window board to not be part of the panel. This picture has 3 panels on the first floor, but the breaks are in unnecessary places. And the windows are different sizes, but the layout just emphasises that. So I think it's worth avoiding putting panels in that look like this. This building is quite tricky to lay out a parget onto. There's far too much going on. There's all sorts of different signs. There's windows that don't match. The ground is sloping, but there's nothing the pargeter can do about those. And so what you try to aim to do is to take something like this that's got uneven windows and doors and make it look smarter. And if you're trying to achieve that, it's best to keep the panelling layout as simple as possible. And here the upper panels between the windows and the lower panels between the windows are good, but the middle bit between the upper and the lower windows is a bit messy. It's a good idea to try and work out the ideal design on paper first. So here's a photograph that's been overlaid a drawing of an improved panel layout. The top panels don't change, and the middle panels are simple rectangles. It's a good idea to avoid L-shaped panels if you're possible, because they look a bit clunky. The bottom panels are made taller, which means the parget is less fussy, which is good, but there are a couple of compromises. There's a large blank space above the left window, and the 2 bottom right panels are squeezed at the top. But overall, I think it's a better layout. And then here's possibly another improvement. The row of small panels in the middle could be combined into one. Quite often the client is keen on this layout, and so is the pargeter, because it makes an opportunity to add a frieze. And then the final modification, the upper sign will have to be removed to do the pargeting, so the design could be simplified again by joining the 2 middle panels together. So if you compare the first parget with the last, the last one is much simpler. And how much you simplify a design is personal choice, but in general, simple is good, because the parget's not there to make a big statement, it's there to be a pleasing background. And this particular building has plenty of signs which make big statements. You don't need to add to them. On a complicated building like this, with windows and doors at different angles and different heights, it may be better to just avoid panels altogether and have a pattern which just covers the surface completely. Pargeting takes a while to do, so plan the work to avoid obvious joins from one day's work to the next, which are called day work joints. Pargeting is often done in panels for just this reason, because you can come to the end of the panel one day and start a new panel the next day and really almost lose the join. I suggest when you're planning the pargeting layout, you take a photo of the building before the scaffold goes up, and then you can use that photo either on the computer if you prefer, or print it out and play around with a pen and paper and design the parget to your picture. If you wait until you arrive on site when the scaffold is up, you won't be able to stand away from it and get a good overall view, and the design will be compromised. This parget shows some panels, and it includes one that's about the narrowest panel it's possible to have. Like this previous one, there's panels above and below the windows, but between these windows is not much space, And I think if there were any less space between the windows, you'd be better off not trying to squeeze in a parget panel, just have it as plain border. If you're doing stamped or combed work, you might well decide to go for a hydrated lime if you can get a good fresh one, because you're likely to be covering quite large areas, and so it's expensive to buy in water. You can add your own water on site. So hydrated lime rather than putty lime. The aggregate, if you're doing stamped work, you want to use sand, because it's chalk is too sticky. It's quite hard to get the stamp off the surface. If you're doing combed work, either will do. These two mixers here have got fibre in them. This one comes as a ready mix. You don't need fibre if you're onto a solid base building. If you're onto a timber frame building, you do need fibre. So choose accordingly. And that's it, really. There's only a couple of things I should mention extra. One is that hydraulic lime and cement are used very successfully with sands to do stamped work onto solid buildings. But that's not my area of expertise, so I won't go into that any further. And the other thing is to say that until a few years ago, there was a bit of a habit among builders of adding in cement into lime plaster to help the set. This is a bad idea. Don't do it. You can get failures that way. Thank you.